So I'm Rebecca Martin. I'm a PhD student in the School of Social Work at Rutgers. And this is my second year working as graduate assistant on the Inclusive Healthy Communities grant program. Karen, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm Karen Alexander. I'm the managing director of NJ TIP at Rutgers and part of the Voorhees Transportation Center at the Blaustein School. And I've been working with the Inclusive Healthy Communities project since its initiation.
So just a moment to tell you why we're presenting on a disability centered project at the Aging Conference. So there's a lot of overlap between the two communities. I think we all kind of intrinsically know that, but I was still kind of surprised by the numbers. 61 million Americans experience a disability, 20% of adults over 70 have a disability, and of adults with disabilities who are over 85 years old, 1 in 3 of them is living alone. So I think that this is a pretty clear indicator about why it's important in age-friendly communities that we're also thinking about disability. And a lot of our grantees also targeted older adults as a group of people who could give them great information about their experiences with disability. So the New Jersey Inclusive Healthy Communities Grant Program is funded by the New Jersey Division of Disability Services and administered through the Blaustein School of Planning and Policy at Rutgers. And the inaugural cycle was an 18-month cycle with 18 grantees, and it was divided into capacity building and implementation awards. Capacity building was meant to help organizations get the networks, the skills, the learning, partnerships, whatever it was that they specifically felt that they needed in order to be able to do their inclusion work. And then the implementation awards were for organizations with demonstrated capacity who were then implementing maybe more of a physical space change to be more inclusive to people with disabilities. A lot of the implementation award grantees undertook capacity building activities on their own because they felt that it was important to strengthen their ability to provide these services. We're currently in the second cycle, which is a 12-month term and has 12 grantees. And the majority of these projects include capacity building activities, though again, a few are focused primarily on implementation. The slide shows sort of what the program objectives are. I think a really important thing to point out about the way that the Inclusive Healthy Communities in New Jersey program is special is that it has grantees from a wide range of backgrounds professionally, and it is really focusing on centering the experiences of people with disabilities and having people with disabilities as thought leaders on the projects. And I think that that's something that we're really proud of, but also it's great to see in this work because who knows better than the people with lived experiences. So I'm going to talk to you mostly about the inaugural cohort of the grantees because I was part of a team with the School of Social Work at Rutgers that did an evaluation study of the program where we interviewed each of the 18 grantees from the first cycle and learned about their experiences as grantees, of what they learned, what they wish they had learned, you know, all sorts of things about their experiences. To give you a little background on them, the geographical distribution is throughout the state, sort of from northeast to southwest of the state. Most of the organizations were nonprofits, but as you see, only half of them had disability expertise as their main focus, which I think is a really unique thing about this project. And a few of them were academically affiliated with universities. Some of the main areas that people focused on was municipal and county-wide inclusion, inclusion for accessible spaces, natural spaces like gardens, parks, some college prep and mentorship, and disability-informed healthcare service was one of our big focus areas as well. So capacity building turned out to be the thing that grantees really highlighted as being a really important part of their process. And then we saw capacity building both with the organizations themselves, a lot of times learning how to do more accessible communication. A lot of the organizations adapted their websites to be more accessible. We had personal development where people learn skills to better talk about disability or how to engage people with disability in the communities. So there was a wide range of what capacity building meant to the grantees, but many of them talked about how they experienced capacity building as being really essential to the work that they did. Here you can see that most of them really felt that they connected with a greater diversity of people with disabilities because of their capacity building, and could better influence policy systems and environments. This quote that I put here, which I'm going to read because I just think it really gets to the heart of it, is from an implementation award grantee. So they didn't necessarily have to do as much capacity building as some of the other grantees, but I thought that this really spoke to it because they said, we never have funding for evaluation. It's really difficult to come across funding that allows you to take the time to do that kind of work in anticipation of your project. We're not experts in this field. To be able to take time and talk to people who are experts with all these different populations that we hope to accommodate was super helpful. And I think there was kind of this consensus that the capacity building element allowed people to do the work right, to do it in a way that was going to really support the people that they were aiming to support. We also saw some other benefits to participation. In general, a big piece of this was the statewide network. And I think that was perhaps a little bit tempered by the COVID situation because this was starting sort of at the height of the pandemic. But it still gave people a lot of opportunity to network with one another, to feel more energized about the work that they're doing, and to find ways to develop their partnerships. And a number of them spoke about the ways that being associated with the grant program really opened doors to speak to some of the movers and shakers in their communities that could help them get things accomplished that maybe they hadn't before. We really wanted to tell you too, because as we got so much feedback about capacity building, we were thinking about ways in which that we would be able to incorporate capacity building for the disability community and for nonprofits who are looking to do more inclusion work that maybe don't have that experience. So as part of the second cohort of trainings, we're going to offer publicly available trainings to anyone who's interested in attending. And some of the topics that we have are listed here for you. I won't read them all, but these are topics that were highly identified by groups of things that they wanted to know more about, or that were assessed as areas for growth. So we're going to have communication strategies for engagement with people with disabilities, an intersectionality series, self-advocates, talking about intellectual and developmental disability, and also some more basic, like empowering frameworks for disability work, so that people who are outside of the disability world will be able to get more of an introduction and understand how to talk about and think about disability. And then the second training program is called Ihc Academy, and we're going to be tapping into all the expertise that was gained by the first cohort of grantees. So they'll be giving presentations about special things that they learned, maybe some of the barriers that they've come up against and how they worked around them in the work that they've done. So if you're interested in learning more, we have some ways that you can see more of our information, or please get on our contact list if you're interested in following the work of the inclusive healthy communities. Does anybody have any questions? Karen, do you have anything you want to add?
So first of all, Rebecca, thank you so much for a really great, quick overview of some of the highlight findings from the evaluation work. I think one of the real takeaways that we heard over and over from the first round grantees, and when we just recently kicked off with our second round of grantees, is both the experience of organizations that have traditionally not served people with disabilities, learning how to connect with organizations that do serve people with disabilities so that they can expand their scope of work. And by the same token, organizations that came into the IHC process that had traditionally served people with disabilities, learning how to crosswalk the other way in terms of this policy, systems, and environmental change, not just doing something as a one-off, but thinking about how do we make a change that we can then sustain over time in ways that makes our program welcoming of all kinds of people. And that was just a really aha on both sides of the fence, so to speak. And having learned that, that really brought us as people who are coordinating this effort to the idea of the IHC trainings and the Ihc Academy, and making that open to anybody who wants to participate, in most cases, not just our grantees, so we can start to build a community that talks that same language in New Jersey. Part of what IHC attempts to do, the Inclusive Healthy Communities Project attempts to do, is create that community so we can begin to have these conversations about systemic change, not just how do I get an accessible piece of equipment in the playground, but if we have an accessible playground, how do we make sure that people with disabilities and without disabilities are using that playground? And how are we making sure that it's supporting health goals for the whole community? That's sort of, you know, the evolution of what we hope the Inclusive Healthy Communities projects will do and have started to do. And we can see that in some of the work of our first round grantees that have done things like make natural spaces much more inclusive to people with mobility impairments, in ways that, you know, a year and a half ago was just great ideas on paper, but now trails are different at the Pinelands Preservation and programming is different at Pinelands, and they've changed as an organization because of their experience as an IHC grantee in terms of how they think about including people in their programming. So all of which is basically a recap of what Rebecca just said, but reinterpreting it. So any questions about the grant process, our grantees?
I have a quick one. So do you see that most counties have Division of Disability Services and Senior Services are separate groups? Do they work together in most counties, or are they very separate?
I think at this point, and I see Althea is with us, so if I misstate this, you'll correct me. I believe all 21 counties in New Jersey have ADRCs at this point, in terms of aging and disability resource centers that are working in a collaborative level in terms of structure. That's not necessarily the same person. There may be directors of each of those functions, but I believe the integration is supposed to be at the county level across the state. Althea, is that correct?
I think you're as much an expert on that as I am,
Okay.
but I do know that the new Deputy Commissioner, Kaylee McGuire, is overseeing both the disability and aging departments. So to me, that speaks to that level of integration as well.
Thanks.
I
Yeah.
would love to see so much more collaboration between the two areas, because I feel like I've heard people say, oh, well, aging gets the money, no, but really both need to work together because neither is getting enough of the resources that can really be going around. And I think we can really be stronger together.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Some of the work that was done in that first cohort, I mentioned Pinelands as one of our implementation grants. One of the other large implementation grants was at the JCC in Somerset County that built an inclusive sensory garden and then enrolled older adults with developmental disability, not older adults, adults with developmental disabilities as teachers and experts within that garden to welcome visitors and explain the different plants and explain what goes on there in terms of the programming. And because the garden itself is accessible, it means it's open to anybody in the community. And that sort of double layer of involving people with disabilities in a leadership role in the actual program delivery was also something that sort of distinguished that particular program. We have another program that, and I won't go through all of them. It's just the ones that off the top of my head, I think are really quite interesting. Rowan University applied for both year one and was awarded in year two to do a program specifically around making reproductive health more accessible for women with intellectual and developmental disabilities in terms of programming and training and education for medical professionals and facilities. And so they're both doing the work themselves and then teaching other medical professionals how to use those tools to make their systems more inclusive and accessible and welcoming. So it's that culture change that is sort of what IHC is about. And I have to echo what Rebecca said, which is, you know, the overlap, the longer you live, the greater your opportunity to become disabled. It's just the way it works. So, you know, the overlap is definitely there, and benefits go in all directions. You know, if it's good for people with disabilities, it's probably going to be good for older people. It's probably going to be good for the whole community in terms of programming and investment. Other questions, comments? Wow, we've stunned you into silence.
Karen, I feel like that was such a mic drop comment that it's just like, it's so good, because it's true. I mean, I think so often we hear about, you know, how curb cuts really change lives of parents because of stroller access, and it changes, you know, delivery persons' experiences and all of those things. So really, there's no downside to incorporating more accessibility and inclusion into any of the work that you do. And when you do, you're just sure to make the biggest impact possible.
Any other questions? Or I'm curious, in terms of those of you who had all these great choices, why'd you come to this session if you didn't know me or Rebecca already? And is there something that you came hoping to learn that maybe we can provide? Yeah, Jean?
Yeah, I came on, I didn't know it was going to be you. So, but I wanted to find out about like the Healthy Grant Program. Like, are there grants available, or can we apply now? And would we go to one of your websites to find out information about that?
So I'm glad you asked the question, because it's the one that we anticipated, which is the funding for this is always part of the annual state budgeting process. And it's certainly our intention and our hope that there will be a round 3, and that, you know, our elected officials in their wisdom will make that investment. We won't have that information, you know, immediately, but we are certainly hoping that that is going to be the case. And you should keep an eye on our website, and by all means sign up for our constant contact list, because as that information becomes available, those will be the methods that we'll be disseminating it through. Okay.
Thank you.
So fingers crossed, but no promises.
Yeah, I got that one.
Yeah, Rod Spearman here from Age Friendly and Elizabeth Lifelong Elizabeth. I came because I was interested in hearing more about age friendly and the disabilities community can work together. I heard things, I understand it, but I didn't get a clear kind of like comment or statement that age friendly, we need to be more advocate and working with the disability community,